Oh honey, grab your tea because Prince Harry has done it again, and this time the fallout is louder than ever. You'd think after Spare, after the Oprah bombshell, after the Netflix saga, after all the court cases and dirty royal mudslinging, he'd finally be ready to zip it. But no, the man just dropped another verbal grenade and the palace is absolutely fuming. Picture this. Harry, on a moving train in Ukraine of all places, supposedly there for charity work, suddenly gives an interview that's shaking the very walls of Buckingham Palace. And what does he say? That his conscience is completely clear. Can you believe that? After years of family secrets spilled, after laying William bare, after branding Camilla as dangerous, and after airing out every last feud like laundry left out in a thunderstorm, he still insists he has nothing to regret. According to him, he wasn't exposing the royals, he was simply correcting the narrative. Bold move, Harry, real bold. And here's the kicker. This interview dropped just days, literally days, after Harry had been seen reconnecting with King Charles, his father, who is battling cancer. The timing could not have been more brutal. One minute the world is touched by this fragile father-son reconnection, the next Harry is basically saying, yeah, I'd do it all again, no regrets. Ouch. That's not just a cold shoulder, that's a full-on slap in the face. Naturally, the palace insiders are livid. Word is they're calling the whole thing tone-deaf and downright disrespectful. Can you imagine? Charles, weak from treatments, clinging to moments of peace, and then here comes Harry, his own son, throwing daggers in an international interview, and people close to the king aren't holding back. One senior source even said, he acts like repeating these stories helps, but it just twists the knife. That's exactly how they feel, that every time Harry claims he's telling his truth, he's carving deeper wounds into an already fragile family. And let's not pretend Harry didn't throw in a sly little jab while he was at it. He casually suggested that the focus this year should be on my dad. Now, to the casual listener, that might sound sweet, like a son concerned about his father's health. But when you peel back the layers, it feels more like Harry shining a spotlight on just how bad Charles's condition really is. Almost like a public reminder that the king's clock is ticking. Palace aides were horrified, some are even calling it cruel, because whether intentional or not, Harry made Charles's illness a headline, and that's a line the royals would never cross. But that's the pattern with Harry, isn't it? One moment he's all about reconciliation, the next he's tossing verbal grenades like confetti at a royal parade. He swears it's not revenge, that it's all about accountability, about setting the record straight, yet every word, every quote feels like another punch in the gut for his family. Honestly, it's no wonder even his most loyal defenders are starting to squirm. And where was Meghan in all this? Practically invisible. She barely got a mention aside from Harry quoting something she once said, telling the truth is the most efficient way to live. He's clung to that line like it's scripture, repeating it as justification for every royal bomb he drops. But people are starting to wonder, does Meghan really stand behind all this chaos? Or is she quietly stepping back while Harry keeps torching bridges? Either way, Harry clearly believes every word he speaks, and that belief, that unshakable righteousness, is exactly what keeps this royal war burning. For him, the truth doesn't just set you free, it sets the whole house on fire. And let's talk optics, because darling, the timing of Harry's Ukraine trip couldn't have been more suspicious. On paper, it was noble. Meeting wounded soldiers, talking about resilience, pushing for recovery systems, helping athletes with prosthetics, and setting up sports facilities. Very moving, very charitable. But then the interview hits, and suddenly critics are whispering, was this really about the mission, or was it another carefully staged PR show? Think about it. The walking stick, the moody train shots, the solemn visits to war memorials. Every photo looked polished to perfection. And this is the same Harry who swears he hates staged photos. Please? If that wasn't staged, then I'm the Queen of England. Now here's where things get even juicier. During that same interview, Harry dropped a line that had eyebrows shooting to the ceiling. He said he's quite Ukrainian in attitude. Excuse me? Yes, you heard that right. Apparently the locals embraced him because, just like them, he does his own thing. Now, on the surface, that might sound humble, but come on, was that humility or pure ego talking? Because let's be real, it's textbook Harry. He loves to paint himself as the misunderstood rebel, the outsider with depth, the one carving his own path. And just like clockwork, he brought up his mother, Princess Diana, again, claiming he gets that fearless independence from her. Cue the collective sigh. People adored Diana because she was authentic, not because she said she was. When Harry invokes her name like this, it feels like he's leaning too hard on her legacy whenever he needs public sympathy. And then came the boldest flex of all. Harry swore he's genuinely happy. Not just content, but fulfilled. Can you believe it? Despite all the drama, despite the headlines, despite his family freezing him out, he insists he's at peace with who he is. But you know what? When someone keeps loudly declaring how happy they are, it starts to sound like they're trying to convince themselves more than anyone else. The frustration was practically dripping off his words. Of course, Harry circled back to his favorite villain, the press. According to him, they are the real problem. He says the British tabloids are the reason reconciliation with his family feels impossible. He says they twist him into looking bitter, angry, ungrateful. He says they control the narrative and that he's just fighting to break free of their lies. But here's the irony, and you can't miss it. Every time Harry opens his mouth for another truth-telling interview, he gives those same tabloids more ammunition. They turn his quotes into headlines, his sound bites into scandals. He swears he's fighting the cycle, but in reality, he's feeding it. That's the contradiction driving everyone crazy. And don't forget, Harry is still knee-deep in legal battles with the media. He's suing major tabloids, positioning himself like a crusader for justice. But the way he talks about it, it's not just about lawsuits, it's about principles. He wants change, accountability, reform, noble goals, sure. But what he doesn't seem to see, or maybe refuses to admit, is that his endless talking keeps the fire alive. Meanwhile, the palace, they're beyond done. Insiders are calling this latest interview a gut punch, especially the parts implying that Charles doesn't have much time left. Can you imagine how that feels, hearing your own son hint to the world that your days are numbered? They thought the fragile father-son meeting might be a turning point, a softening. Instead, Harry turned around and threw gasoline on the flames. For a family that lives by never complain, never explain, his behavior isn't just shocking, it's betrayal. And you know what's become crystal clear? There's a recurring pattern with Harry. He says he wants reconciliation, he says he wants peace, but every time he speaks, he somehow makes the fracture worse. One insider compared it to trying to patch a wound while someone keeps ripping the stitches open. Brutal, but accurate. Then came the line that really sent Buckingham Palace into full panic mode. Harry declared, "You cannot have reconciliation before you have truth." Now, to the public, that sounds noble. Who doesn't want honesty, right? But behind palace walls, those words landed like a bomb. Because to them, Harry isn't calling for dialogue. He's accusing them. He's saying they are the liars, they are the guilty ones, and until they confess, there's no peace. That doesn't leave much room for forgiveness. It just keeps pointing fingers. And here's the sting. This statement came right after that rare reconnection with Charles. The king, reportedly very sick, welcomed his son back for a moment. It was fragile, it was emotional, and then Harry turned around and made it feel transactional. His remarks about life being precious and wanting to focus more on his father sounded less like love and more like strategy. Cold, calculated, strategic. That's how insiders are describing it, and frankly, it's not hard to see why. And if you thought Harry might soften on Spare, think again. He defended that book with the same fiery passion, calling it necessary, truthful, and absolutely worth it. Even now, after the backlash, after the pain, after the family fallout, he insists he'd do it all over again. That book wasn't just a memoir, it was a public execution of private moments. From painful stories about William to icy jabs at Camilla, he put it all out there. To him, it was cleansing. To his family, it was betrayal written in ink. But here's the wildest part. Harry doesn't see himself as responsible. When asked how the public perceives him, he brushes it off. If people think he's bitter, he says it's media manipulation. If people think he's stubborn, he says it's principles. Never once does he pause to ask, have my actions actually caused harm? Nope. It's always someone else's fault, someone else's narrative. And yet, in the same breath, he claims he feels supported by the British public. That's a tricky claim because while some still admire him, a huge part of the public now sees him as out of touch, overly sensitive, even hypocritical. It's hard to hold the moral high ground when you're flying private jets from charity trips while cashing in on family wounds. The contradictions are piling up and people are starting to roll their eyes. Honestly, Harry's biggest enemy might not be the press or the palace. It might just be his own mouth. And that's the tragedy of it all. Harry keeps saying he wants peace, but every time he speaks, he digs the rift deeper. He insists his truth is the only truth, leaving no room for compromise. What was once a chance at healing now feels like a stage for more drama. The palace calls it betrayal. Critics call it hypocrisy. And fans are torn. One thing's undeniable. Harry's words set fire wherever they land. For him, truth may feel like freedom, but for the royal family, it's a never-ending war.